The delicate balance of power in the Middle East was shattered on the 12th of June 2025, marking the beginning of a direct and devastating conflict between Iran and Israel. For years, a shadow war of covert operations, cyber attacks, and proxy battles had defined their relationship. However, this simmering animosity erupted into open warfare with a decisive Israeli maneuver. Israel launched sophisticated airstrikes aimed at Iran's nuclear facilities and critical military infrastructure. This large-scale aerial assault, codenamed Operation Rising Lion, was coordinated by the Israel Defense Forces in collaboration with Mossad and Israeli defense industries, representing a significant escalation from previous clandestine actions. The stated rationale behind Operation Rising Lion was to preemptively neutralize what Israel has long perceived as an existential threat, a nuclear-armed Iran. The Israeli government has consistently voiced its concerns over Iran's nuclear program, suspecting it of having military ambitions despite Tehran's insistence that its intentions are purely for peaceful energy production. The strikes targeted not just buildings but also the human element of the program, resulting in the deaths of prominent Iranian military officials and nuclear scientists. This was a clear message from Israel, indicating it would no longer tolerate the perceived ambiguity of Iran's nuclear development, and was prepared to use overt military force to dismantle it, regardless of the international consequences. Iran's response was swift and furious, transforming a unilateral Israeli strike into a bilateral war. Within hours, Iran launched a barrage of retaliatory missile strikes against targets inside Israel. This was not a token gesture. It was a powerful demonstration of Iran's own military capabilities. The missiles were designed to overwhelm Israel's sophisticated air defense systems, including the renowned Iron Dome. While many were intercepted, some managed to penetrate the defensive shield, causing explosions and sowing terror in Israeli cities. The immediate retaliation confirmed fears that an attack on Iran would not go unanswered, plunging the two nations into a cycle of attack and counterattack that continues to intensify. The initial days of the conflict have been marked by a grim tally of human loss on both sides, underscoring the brutal reality of this new war. In Iran, explosions rocked the capital, Tehran, with the health ministry reporting a devastating toll of 224 people killed in the initial Israeli offensive. Iran's ambassador to the United Nations later updated this figure, stating that over 220 civilians, including 20 children, had been killed, with more than 1,000 injured. In Israel, the Iranian counterstrikes have also proven deadly. At least 24 people have been killed by incoming missiles, and nearly 600 have been injured as citizens scramble for shelter amidst the escalating violence. The conflict continues to escalate with each passing day, as both nations engage in a deadly tit-for-tat exchange of fire. The initial Israeli operation was not a single event but the start of an ongoing campaign. Reports from the region indicate that Israeli forces are continuing their aerial assaults on strategic targets within Iran, aiming to inflict maximum damage on the country's military and nuclear infrastructure. In return, Iran has shown no sign of backing down, continuing its missile launches against Israeli territory. This sustained exchange has created a palpable sense of fear and instability, not just within the warring nations, but across the entire Middle East, as the world watches a regional Cold War turn terrifyingly hot. The international community has reacted with a mixture of alarm and frantic calls for de-escalation. World leaders are acutely aware that a full-blown war between Israel and Iran could have catastrophic consequences far beyond their borders. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has implored both sides to show maximum restraint, a sentiment echoed by many. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer emphasized that stability in the Middle East must be the priority, urging a return to diplomacy. Even Pope Leo XIV has weighed in, calling for sincere dialogue after observing that the situation had deteriorated drastically. These appeals highlight a global consensus that the conflict must be contained before it spirals into a wider regional conflagration. The United States, a key ally of Israel, finds itself in a particularly precarious position. President Donald Trump cut short his attendance at the G7 summit in Canada, citing the need to return to Washington to manage the crisis. His early departure signals the gravity of the situation. There is growing concern within the international community about the potential for American involvement. Sources have indicated that President Trump is becoming increasingly receptive to the idea of using U.S. military assets to strike Iranian nuclear facilities, a move that would dramatically expand the conflict and risk dragging the United States into a direct war with Iran, a prospect that deeply worries its allies. Amidst the chaos, there have been faint glimmers of a potential diplomatic off-ramp, primarily from the Iranian side. Tehran seems to understand the perilous position it is in, facing the combined might of Israel and potentially the United States. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, has stated that Iran will reciprocate a cessation of hostilities, indicating a willingness to halt its retaliatory strikes if Israel stops its attacks. Furthermore, he has signaled that Iran is open to returning to nuclear talks. This suggests that Iran is actively seeking a way to de-escalate, provided it can do so without appearing to capitulate, offering a fragile opportunity for peacemakers to intervene. The Iran-Israel war has sent immediate and powerful shockwaves through the global economy, with the energy market being the most sensitive barometer of the crisis. Oil prices surged to their highest levels in nearly 5 months, as traders braced for the inevitable disruption to supply. U.S. oil futures climbed by over 4%, with crude prices spiking by a staggering 23% this month alone. This sharp increase is a direct consequence of fears that the conflict could threaten the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical oil choke point. This narrow waterway is the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, and a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes through it daily. The strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz cannot be overstated. Oil tankers carrying crude from major producers like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Iraq, and of course Iran, must navigate this perilous channel. Any disruption, whether through a deliberate blockade by Iran or as collateral damage from the ongoing military exchanges, would severely constrict global energy flows. The World Bank has issued a stark warning, noting that a prolonged conflict could trigger a major global economic shock. Their projections include a worst-case scenario where oil prices could soar to $150 a barrel, a level that would cripple economies, drive inflation, and potentially push millions of people into hunger worldwide. For the diverse economies of Africa, the conflict presents a complex and varied set of challenges, and for a few, opportunities. Oil-importing nations across the continent, such as Kenya and Mozambique, are particularly vulnerable. Many are already grappling with significant economic headwinds, including currency depreciation and depleted foreign exchange reserves. A sustained period of high oil prices will place immense pressure on their national budgets, increase the cost of fuel and transport, and have a detrimental knock-on effect on almost every sector of their economies. This could lead to social unrest and exacerbate existing economic hardships for millions of people who are already struggling. Conversely, a small number of African nations stand to gain, at least in the short term. Gold, a traditional safe haven asset, tends to perform well during times of global instability. As investors flee to safety, the price of gold rises, which would boost the foreign exchange earnings for major gold producers on the continent, such as South Africa, Ghana, and Tanzania. However, this silver lining is a narrow one. The overarching impact of a major Middle Eastern war, especially one that disrupts global trade and drives up energy prices, is overwhelmingly negative for the economic stability and development prospects of the African continent as a whole. As the conflict rages, many international law experts have begun to question the legality of the initial Israeli action that ignited the war. Under the United Nations Charter, the use of force is permissible only in self-defense against an ongoing or imminent armed attack. Michael Becker, a professor of international human rights law, has argued that based on publicly available information, Israel's Operation Rising Lion does not appear to meet this strict criterion. The strikes were presented as preemptive, targeting a potential future threat rather than a clear and present one. This raises profound questions about breaches of international law, adding a layer of legal and moral complexity to an already volatile situation. The framework of public international law offers several avenues for de-escalation, though their effectiveness depends on the political will of the nations involved. The United Nations Security Council has the primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security, and could pass a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire. International courts could be called upon to adjudicate on the legality of the military actions. Furthermore, principles of international humanitarian law, also known as the laws of war, must be upheld to protect civilians and limit the brutality of the conflict. These legal mechanisms provide a crucial, non-violent toolkit for resolving disputes, but they are only as strong as the international community's commitment to enforcing them. The most immediate and viable path away from further bloodshed lies in diplomacy. The international calls for restraint from figures like the United Nations Secretary General and various world leaders must be translated into concrete diplomatic action. This requires creating a forum for negotiation, potentially brokered by neutral third-party states or international organizations. Iran has already signaled a willingness to talk if the attacks cease, offering a critical opening. The challenge for diplomats will be to craft a solution that allows both sides to step back from the brink without losing face, addressing the core security concerns of Israel while respecting the sovereignty of Iran. Ultimately, the future of the region hangs in the balance, teetering between two starkly different outcomes. The first is a terrifying escalation, potentially drawing in the United States and other regional powers, leading to a war with unimaginable human and economic costs. The second is a return to the negotiating table, however fraught with difficulty. The path to peace requires an immediate cessation of hostilities, a commitment to sincere dialogue, and a renewed focus on long-term solutions, including a return to nuclear talks. The world is watching and hoping that reason will prevail over retribution, and that a lasting peace can be forged from the ashes of this dangerous conflict.